Hello students, today we'll do a writing passage together. Let's begin. The title of the passage is Material Ecology Design for the Future. In 2006, architect and designer Mary Oxman was still a doctoral student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, when she proposed a radical new approach for the field of design. Oxman quickly established herself as a rising star in design, having been featured in both peer-reviewed scholarly journals and popular magazines across the world. The first question says, which choice most effectively establishes the main topic of the passage? So a good idea would be to first understand what the rest of the passage is saying. So we should ideally come back to this question. But we have some indication of what a right answer should be about. We can see that in the first line it says that she proposed a radical new approach for the field of design, right? Which means that my answer should introduce an idea and it should talk about an idea in some detail. So if I look at option A, that she quickly established herself as a rising star in design, having been featured in both peer-reviewed scholarly journals and popular magazines across the world, this doesn't really introduce any idea. Does not introduce an idea, right? And so this is not a good answer. Let's look at option B. Oxman envisioned a more holistic and ecological design paradigm that combined biology, engineering, and computer science. She called this approach material ecology. This is a good option because it kind of explains what the radical new approach is, the combination of ecological and holistic paradigm that has biology, engineering, and computer science, and the name that was given to it. So this is a good option. I'll keep it. Option C, Oxman coined the term material ecology to describe an interdisciplinary research project which she documented on a blog by the same name. This is not as detail oriented as option B, right? So the details are missing in this. So it is not as good an answer as option B. So I won't choose it over B. And she set out to discover a new way to build things. Again, this is vague, so I will not choose this. So my answer is option B. And if you're not sure, you can read the rest of the passage and come back and confirm this because this is supposed to establish the main topic of the passage. Let's move on. In Oxman's view, early 20th, 21st century architectural design was stubbornly rooted in the design principles of the industrial era. Assembled with discrete, mass-produced interchangeable parts, most structures were built like machines. Conventional construction processes, Oxman observed, were in contrast to the dynamic organic ways most biological structures occur in nature. Now, the question is which choice best supports the idea in the previous sentence, which is to say, early 21st century architectural design was stubbornly rooted in the design principles of the industrial era. So if you look at no change, the line that is already given, assembled with discrete, mass-produced interchangeable parts, most structures were built like machines. This is explaining the previous line, right? Because I'm trying to say that 21st century architectural design was rooted in the industrial era principles, and those principles are explained in the current line. So this is a good option, so I'll keep it. Having studied biology, computational design, and architecture, Oxman approached architectural design with a uniquely interdisciplinary perspective. This doesn't follow from the previous line because it doesn't explain how Oxman thought that early 21st century design was rooted in the industrial era. So I'll not take this. Oxman spent her time studying natural structural systems like bone, wood, feathers, shells, and nests and was impressed by their innate beauty. So I know that she ultimately decided to look at biological structures, right? The next line does tell me that. And this is talking about biological structures. But remember that my question needs me to support the idea in the previous sentence. It needs to build on the idea of how early 21st century architecture was rooted in the industrial era. And this option doesn't explain that. This option talks about biology, which is something that Oxman came to work in. So C is not a good answer. Option D, collaboration with nature was fundamental to Oxman's concept of material ecology. Again, this is not something that explains the previous line, just as option C did not. So my best answer is option A, which explains how 21st century architecture was rooted in the industrial era. Let's go to the next question. Um, Conventional construction processes, Oxman observed, were in contrast to the dynamic organic ways most biological structures occur in nature. There, material is not a secondary but an essential aspect of design. Now, I'm using a comma here, right? Which means that the part after the comma should be connected to this using a word like where, which makes B a good answer. If I say their material is not a secondary, then that basically starts a new sentence, which means a comma can't be used here. To start a new sentence, I would need a semicolon or a full stop. And so option A cannot work. Option C cannot work because if I need to say where, then a full stop will not make sense. And option D is not correct because it removes the word there, puts a comma, and says material is not a secondary and doesn't really explain the connection between the two sentences. So the right answer is option B. Let's go to the next question. By utilizing new 3D printing technologies, Oxman argued, designers could begin to grow or fabricate structures from seamless multifunctional materials that would be both integrated into and responsive to the surrounding environment. So, this is what is called an idiomatic question because here they are testing you on the correct prepositions to use with the word integrated and responsive. So if I'm talking about materials that are integrated into, then that's fine. I can also say integrated with, but none of the options have with. So I can just go with into. And responsive to, again, that is correct. Responsive takes the preposition to. It does not take for, of, or with. So here my answer is no change. Materials that are integrated into and responsive to the surrounding environment. The possibilities she imagined were remarkably creative. Buildings made with breathable exteriors and concrete that could repair itself, like bone. Indeed, some might even be called poetic, such as shell like homes with insulation that functioned like a bird's plumage, raising and flattening feathers to regulate temperature. So, this kind of paragraph explains what Oxman's design philosophy was, and it kind of tells us that the answer that we chose for question one is correct because it does talk about using biological elements in design. Okay, let's move on. Since Oxman introduced the concept, material ecology has garnered acclaim and influenced designers worldwide. In 2014, Schlescher, Simon Schlescher, an architectural designer at the University of Stuttgart, followed Oxman's biomimetic approach to solving a particular engineering challenge. Now, here I need to punctuate the segment correctly. So I know that my main sentence is Simon Schlescher followed Oxman's biomimetic approach. And the fact that he's an architectural designer at the University of Stuttgart is what is called additional information because it introduces him. And my sentence can work even without this information. So when I have additional information, I'll put a comma before it and a comma after it. That means there should be a comma here before and there should be a comma after Stuttgart, which is already there. So the correct option, which has a comma before and after Stuttgart, is option D. Option C is not correct because that has the second comma after designer and leaves out at the University of Stuttgart. And so it kind of misrepresents the additional information that we spoke about. So the right answer is option D. So Simon Schlecher followed Oxman's biomimetic approach in solving a particular engineering challenge, designing shading systems for irregularly shaped glass paneled skyscrapers. Question 6 is again a punctuation question. I need to talk about the challenge that Schleicher solved, and that challenge is to design shading systems for irregular shaped glass panel skyscrapers. A colon is a good punctuation for this purpose. A colon is one, it comes at the end of a complete sentence, and this entire portion in 2014, Simon Schlechter, so on and so forth, followed approach in solving a particular engineering challenge. That's a complete sentence. And the other thing colon does is it creates an expectation. It basically tells you that the next part will talk about that particular challenge that Schlecher intended to solve. And so this is a good uh, punctuation here. And so the right answer should be A. The problem with option B is that if you have a semicolon here, then both the portion to the left of the semicolon and to the right of the semicolon should be a complete sentence. And the second part, designing shading systems for irregularly shaped glass panel skyscrapers, that is not a complete sentence, so this is wrong. The placement of colon in option C is incorrect. I need to talk about the challenge. So the colon has to be after challenge. So this is wrong. I can use a dash instead of a colon after challenge, but in D, the placement of the dash is wrong. And so D is also incorrect. The right answer being option A. Okay, let's move on. External awnings, which are assembled out of standardized parts, often don't fit the atypical contours of modern buildings and are prone to weather damage. Recognizing the insufficiency of these traditional rigid body devices, Schessler's designs were modeled on the elastic movement principle of plants. Now, in this question, this is known as a modifier question, and it's a very common question on the SAT writing section. What you have is a modifier which talks about some subject or some noun. Who is recognizing the insufficiency of these devices? It's Schlesinger himself, right? And so the subject of the underlined part should be Schlesinger, not Schlecher's designs. So option A can't be correct. Schlecher modeled his designs on the elastic movement. This looks like a good answer. The elastic movements cannot be the subject because the elastic movements have not recognized the insufficiency of these traditional rigid body devices. And so D is also wrong. So the right answer is option B. Be careful when you have a modifier question, the subject is the one that is referred to in the modifier. His solution was a single material facade shading structure that could cover a building like the petals on a flower, able to open and contract in response to changing weather conditions. So this paragraph was about how Oxman's principles were applied by a researcher, by a designer. Schlecher's design is just one application born from Oxman's progressive design philosophy. In fact, Oxman herself is at work essaying the conceits. Okay, first let's look at question 8. Which choice provides the most effective transition from the previous paragraph to this one? Okay, so the previous paragraph was about Schlecher's design and how it took from Oxman's philosophy. So option A by itself is a good option, right? It looks like a good option because it was just one application, and then I talk about Oxman herself working on something like this. So I'll keep A for now. Option B, Schlescher's design is part of a larger research project titled Deployable Structures in Architecture, Flexible Surface Structures on the. This doesn't really go with what we are trying to say next, right? I'm trying to say that Schlescher followed from Oxman's philosophy, and Oxman herself is working on something like this. So B is not a good answer. Schlescher's design was published in 2015 issue of Computer Aided Design, which was edited by Oxman. Again, this doesn't flow into the paragraph because the point is not where his design was published, but how his design came from a certain philosophy, Oxman's philosophy. Option D, Schlescher's design is, as of 2018, still at an early stage of development, and Schlescher himself is now an assistant professor at the University of California in Berkeley. Again, this doesn't really matter at this stage. Schlescher's professional growth or professional work here is not relevant because we need to focus on how his design is relevant to Oxman's philosophy. So, indeed, the best answer is option A, that his design is just one application born from Oxman's progressive design philosophy. In fact, Oxman herself is at work. Now, this is what is known as formal and neutral word choice questions. Okay. I do not want to talk about anything that is exaggerated. I'm trying to say that Oxman is at work on something that comes from her philosophy. So I will not use essaying the conceits of her fancy. Conceits of her fancy is not the correct usage. It implies that she is doing something which goes beyond practical work, and it is not formal, it is not respectful. So option A is out. Cooking up fresh stuff is also informal. So this also is out. Developing new ideas is a good option. So I'll keep it. Following her hunches, again, not the best way to represent the work a designer does. A hunch is an intuition, but it's not a formal representation. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that she's working on her ideas, she's working on her philosophy. So the right answer is option C. Oxman herself is at work developing her work at MIT, where she is now a professor. Let's move on. Her recent projects include a 3D printed garment designed for keeping and sustaining life at a time of interstellar space travel. Okay, so this is what is known as a redundancy question, a question where you have to choose from options which have too many words that are not needed, right? Because if I say keeping and sustaining life, I don't need to repeat that, right? Because to sustain life is to maintain life. So option A cannot be the right answer. A garment designed for sustaining human biological systems during a period of space travel. Again, this is too long, and I can say this simply, and I can already see that there is an option that is going to say this in a simpler way. So I'll not keep this. Designed for the preservation of life while traveling on a journey through space. Again, too many words when fewer words can do. So this is out. So D, garment designed for sustaining life during space travel is the best answer. Succinct, brief, without redundancy. So Oxman's projects include a 3D printed garment designed for sustaining life during space travel and a room-sized structural dome spun entirely by silkworms. Unlike conventional housing structures, the silkworm spun dome is beautiful, biodegradable, self-healing, and replicable. The writer wants a concluding sentence that offers a general assessment of the main topic of the passage. Which choice best accomplishes this goal? So, this is an interesting question because here you need to talk about something which is a concluding statement. It should not just refer to this paragraph, but should kind of encompass the entire passage. So I don't think option A would be a good answer because while it talks about this dome made of silkworms, it kind of finishes the passage there itself and doesn't kind of conclude the passage by summarizing Oxman's work. And a concluding statement should always be a statement of summary. It should not just focus on what this particular paragraph is saying. So I'm not very happy with A, but I'll come back to it in case I don't find a better option. Option B, Oxman's design work has even expanded into the realm of high fashion with 3D printable gowns and bodices customized for each model. Okay, you'd never want to introduce a new idea in the conclusion. A conclusion is a summary. So the realm of high fashion cannot be the answer. So B is out. At the vanguard of her field, Oxford is looking far beyond the conventions of the present to define the future of design. This is a good answer, right? Because it talks about the new ideas that she's developing and it gives a nice summary to her design philosophy and the fact that she has come up with material ecology and is working on new projects. So I'll keep this for now. Option D, Oxman was not the first designer to take inspiration from the natural world, and she will certainly not be the last. Again, this is not a good concluding statement because if I say she was not the first and will not be the last, the expectation is that we will talk about those people, people who were first and people who are continuing to work. And that is not something you discuss in a concluding statement. So D definitely is also not a good answer. And so the best answer, the best concluding statement, which summarizes the passage and also talks about Oxman's continuing work, is option C. Hope you found this video useful, students. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and help it grow. Also share it with friends who are preparing for the SAT so that this can help others as well. Thank you.